Good morning, everyone. Jim Clark here at the Synchronicity Sanctuary to share another contemplative focus with you today. And that focus that I want to go over with you today is ego on the wall. Who's the fairest of them all? The egocentric experience is orchestrated by consciousness to explore what it is not. The ego, as a tool of consciousness, creates the illusion of separation, crafting a virtual reality where the self appears distinct from everything else. This division between the subject and the object leads to a relative imbalance limiting holistic self awareness. This is what we call the creation game, the game that where consciousness has consciously created itself for the purpose of magnifying its own bliss. It sounds contrary, but it isn't, because there is only one. Consciousness is everything. There is nothing else. Irregardless of our limitations in experiencing this truth, um, that is what all meditative traditions from thousands of years ago have agreed upon, that there is only one consciousness, that consciousness is unified, irregardless of the human experience that we're having here. The ultimate truth is that. And this game that has been created, the creation game, is created so that it can multiply itself in the form of human beings and everything else, and then rediscover itself. And that rediscovery is a huge burst of bliss for every human being that's ever had that kind of experience, a breakthrough experience where suddenly you're immersed in the truth of who you are, where you are consciousness, and the human being role that you were caught up in disappears for a moment, even just for a moment. And then the power of such experience changes you forever. It, it reverberates in your cellular structure for the rest of your life and ongoing, which is part of the evolutionary process that we're all going through. We go into the human experience in the beginning to become immersed in it, to, to become convinced that we're human beings. Because when you're coming from Source, as Source, it's not so easy to pretend like you're something so diminished in your experience as a human being is, without any awareness of their truth at all. And so we get immersed into this process, and then once that process is complete, then we start to evolve back to our truth. And this is where many human beings, especially if you're a meditator, you're definitely in that part of your cycle. You've been through the cycle of becoming identified with the illusion of who you are as a human being. Now you're evolving back to the truth of who you are. And that discovery and that bliss of that process and the power of it is how consciousness is magnifying its own bliss. You are the consciousness that's accomplishing the intention in consciousness to fully be itself. So how about that? So here we are playing the human game. I know right here where I am, there's all kinds of things going on. We got problems here, problems there. We have snow, we have winter, and yet, does that really mean anything? It's just part of life. So the ups and downs in life that we have as a human being are part of the experiences that we have as a separate human being, an unconscious separate human being, where we are here, I'm here, and you're separate from me, and everything in my office here is separate from me, period. So that's what it looks like. And yet I feel the reverberations of my truth as I'm saying this, because of my meditative practice and the fact that I have had such a breakthrough, and that has forever changed who I am in terms of my own awareness. As we expand our awareness and through the meditative process, we start to move that imbalance that I mentioned in the beginning here, because the space between the difference between subject and object, that separation, begins to close in on itself as we become more and more balanced. And meditation has always been the primary and most effective balancing technique. Why is that? Because here we are in a relative field of experience, and the relative field of awareness is the external and the internal. Internal awareness being towards the positive, towards the truth of who we are. The external is magnifying the illusion of separation. And so as we meditate and we go in to our being and focus there, we start to build that polarity in our own human experience. And eventually we build it to the point where we're able to cross that barrier and break through and have an experience of our truth, of everybody's truth. And then we have done what we came here to do, really. And then we share that and we encourage others to do so, and on and on and on. This is just the creation game towards this evolutionary process to fully be itself. And what more can I say about that? We're all doing this, and if you're watching this, you're probably in that cycle yourself. Otherwise, it wouldn't interest you. So, at any rate, it's a great process. It's difficult, it's challenging, but then what isn't as a human being? In our limitations, as when we're not aware, when we have had no validation of ourselves as consciousness, then our experience is basically all fear-based experience, which is not a pleasant way to live at any time, anywhere, in any form. And yet, that's what we limit ourselves to, so that way we are encouraged to evolve out of it, to seek something better. And this requires many, many, many lifetimes of experience as a human being before we start to develop that sense that there's more to this than meets the eye, and we're so tired of the fear-based living and we just want to break through. We're ready to give it all up. I'd rather die than live in fear, kind of a situation. So we do, in some form or another, through the human experience and lifetime after lifetime. And when we get that point, we start the evolutionary process wherein we start to attract meditation in our lives. We attract teachers, we attract people who are meditators, we attract events and situations wherein they help us to magnify our bliss, to wake us up, to expand our awareness. And to do that, we find some form of meditation that appeals to us, and then we go there and we stick to it, and eventually we also find ourselves in the grace of a master of meditation, who is a being who has evolved to the point where they can take a human form and remain fully aware in that form of themselves as consciousness and everything as consciousness. So when you are in the company of someone such as this, you have someone to guide you and to help you along the way that can see clearly what's keeping you, what's holding you back. What do you need to journey so that you can get rid of this limiting data that's holding you back? And my teacher was just such a one as this very, very powerful human being whose energetic still reverberates throughout this sanctuary, even after he left his body many years ago. So but I know that when I first came into this environment, that I was very challenged at first. I'd been meditating for several years before I came here, but to be in that presence is like a meditation amped up 100-fold. And it may be challenging, but that's what real meditation is like. The more challenged you are in such energy, and when you stay in that energy anyway, the more stuff comes up that's not congruent with that expanded awareness experience. So anything that's incongruent, anything that you're holding on to consciously or unconsciously, where you define yourself as just a human being, has to be released so that there's no conflict. You know, awareness expansion cannot remain as it is where there is conflict, where there is stress, because the nature of true reality is love. It's no stress. It's just one consciousness. There is no other, so there's no stress. There's only celebration of being. And eventually, this is what we are trying to evolve ourselves to, and this is where we are going. I shouldn't say we are trying to evolve ourselves there. We're trying to avoid that evolution sometimes, but that's the course that we're all on. And there's no getting away from it, because we are consciousness and we can't escape the truth of who we are. Simple as that. Even though our experience is contrary to that truth, and that the experience of that truth is a rare and difficult moment to create for ourselves, we will create it, because that's the intention in us as consciousness to experience. That is the evolutionary process from illusion to truth. And nobody escapes this, because nobody really wants to. The ego wants to escape it, because that's the death of the ego, which is why we say ego, ego on the wall, who's the fairest of them all? None of them. There is no fair ego. Their ego is the illusion that keeps us from experiencing the truth of who we are. And so the momentum of our evolutionary process will gradually dissolve the ego, do away with the ego. And what is left is the celebration of ourselves for the consciousness that we are. And so to that end, I bid you adieu until next Monday, and I hope you're having some very holistic experiences in your process. And if you're not, you only think you're not, because in truth, we're all the same consciousness that is all and everything. So I'll leave you with that thought and that focus, and the journey that you're on, which is inescapable. You're going to illume no matter how hard you try not to. All right, so until next Monday, I bid you adieu, and thank you so much for watching.